Good morning. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Today we are in lesson 51 of the Gospel of Matthew, and we're covering Matthew chapter 23, verses 23 through 39. And this one's called Spiritual Pride. In this chapter, Matthew reports 8 different woes that Jesus spoke against the scribes and Pharisees in his final public message before his crucifixion. In our previous lesson, we covered 4 of these, and today we will cover the last 4. When we look back at the history of the Jewish people, we can see the length, breadth, and height that God went to in order to demonstrate his love for these people. God made a covenant with Abraham. He would bless this nation and promised that all the nations of the world would be blessed through Abraham. God brought the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, accompanied them every step on a 40-year journey through the wilderness, and brought them into a land flowing with milk and honey that he had prepared for them. God protected them when enemies attacked. Even while they were worshiping an idol made by their own hands, God was giving Moses the laws that would bless them and guide them. As if God's laws were not enough, the Jewish leadership added to those laws and placed additional burdens on the people of Israel. Further demonstrating the human condition, these Jewish leaders elevated themselves higher than they elevated God. In all circumstances, they esteemed self above others and above God. Through the prophets, God gave the Jewish people over 300 prophecies that pointed forward to Jesus. But when he came, though the Jewish people had been waiting for him for generations, the Jewish leadership was unprepared. Somehow they did not see Jesus as the Messiah. Much of this likely had to do with their unwillingness to have anyone supplant their power, even if it was the Messiah. Every step of the way they tried to trip Jesus up, even to the point of attributing his miracles to Satan. In response, Jesus blinded their eyes because they did not know the time of his visitation, though he came specifically for them. Today, many Christians seem to walk in condemnation of the Jewish people. Part of that is misunderstanding why we can see him as the Messiah, but they cannot. As Jesus said, their eyes have been spiritually blinded. They cannot see him because he will not allow them to see him presently. That does not mean that there are not a remnant of formerly Jewish believers who have accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior. God has promised that if we seek him, we will find him. It seems that Jewish believers who truly seek him can have those spiritual blinders removed. But before we cast stones at others who do not know Jesus, we should instead focus on how much we can resemble the Pharisees. When we emphasize the law above the lawgiver, we are doing exactly the same thing. When we change the gospel from the one that has been shared with us through the Bible to something different, we have done the same thing. When we seek positions inside the church in self-glorification, we have done the same thing. So as we read the remaining 4 woes today, perhaps we should focus on how each of these could apply to us, to Christians today, in much the same manner. Let's read our first passage, Matthew chapter 23, verses 23 through 36, says this. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done, without leaving the others undone. Blind guides, who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence. blind Pharisee. First cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Therefore you are witnesses against yourselves, that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up, then, the measure of your father's guilt. Serpents, brood of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell? Therefore, indeed I send you prophets, wise men, and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city, that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Assuredly, I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Leviticus chapter 27, verse 30 dealt with the law concerning the tithe of the land, and that tithe included even the seeds and the fruit from the trees. That is what is being referenced in this fifth woe of the chapter, the first we deal with today. Jesus calls attention to the Jewish leadership going through the motions. While they are following even the smallest aspects of God's law, down to tiny seeds and herbs, it is more similar to checking items off a list instead of following that law because of what is inside their hearts. Jesus prefers justice, mercy, and faith to mint, anise, and cumin, certainly more effective. Samuel the prophet had this to say to King Saul, who in the same manner rebelled against God, even though God had anointed him. 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 22 through 23 says this, So Samuel said, Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he also has rejected you from being king. In the next woe, Jesus accuses the Pharisees of being full of extortion and self-indulgence. Extortion is no different from stealing, and it likely refers to forcing the Jewish people to pay or bribe them, perhaps by imposing guilt. Through that extortion, the Pharisees had given themselves an enormous cost of living raise. Jesus points out that their sinful actions are simply a result of their wicked hearts. In the next woe, Jesus refers to the Pharisees as whitewashed sepulchres. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem is beside the eastern gate. As mentioned before, that gate is sealed today and has been since 1541. But if we go through the Lion's Gate and walk to the east, the first thing that will catch our eyes are the graves in the Kidron Valley. On the other side of the Kidron Valley is the Garden of Gethsemane and the Mount of Olives. In addition to many gravestones in that valley, most notable are the huge and ornate tombs that have been built in this location and have been there for centuries. Some of these are the tomb of Absalom, the tomb of Zechariah, and the tomb of Jehoshaphat. Each of these has beautiful stones, and in the sunlight they shine so bright and beautiful. But Jesus was calling attention to the fact that though these tombs might be beautiful on the outside, all that was on the inside was death. When he compared the Pharisees to these tombs, Jesus was stating that though they were all dressed up on the outside, what was inside was death. Once again, Jesus, the cardiologist, diagnosed a mortal heart problem with the Pharisees. Desperately wicked, deceitful at best. In the final woe, Jesus refers to an excuse made by the Pharisees. They claimed they would not have killed the prophets as those who came before them did. Jesus held them responsible all the way back to Abel. It was exactly the same sinful heart. In addition, Jesus was speaking prophetically as he would be crucified within the week because of their motive. Every single one of his apostles also would be martyred, except for John. Though John was burned in oil, he did not die a martyr's death. Only Jesus could see inside their hearts and revealed that the Pharisees had the same wicked hearts of those who had come before them. Let's read the final passage. Matthew 23, verses 37 through 39 says this. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Previously, in Luke 19, verses 41 through 44, Luke told us of a time when Jesus wept over Jerusalem. The same sadness exists in this verse. We are told about the tears of Jesus only 3 times in the New Testament. One was when Jesus wept at the grave of Lazarus, even knowing that momentarily he was going to bring Lazarus back to life. The second was this verse in Luke, when Jesus wept in sadness over the missed opportunities of the people of Israel, and specifically the people of Jerusalem, whom he had come to save. The third time occurred when Jesus wept tears of blood in anticipation of the cross, on the night of his arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane. The heart of Jesus broke for Jerusalem. It is difficult for us to completely understand what is occurring here. First of all, don't forget that Jesus was fully God and fully man. I don't think we can even grasp what he felt as fully man, as he was fuller than we are. But we certainly cannot grasp even a bit of what it was like to be fully God. But let me at least mention a few different aspects of this. Before the foundations of the earth, this had been God's plan. But even at that time, God knew the outcome. For example, God understood that even though the Jews were his chosen people, and Jesus would die for them, because of their misguided leaders, God knew they would not accept him. But it was worse than simply shunning him. Even in this verse, Jesus identifies the city of Jerusalem as the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. Jesus said that he wanted to gather the children of Jerusalem together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. This is a common description in the Bible concerning God, wanting to protect us beneath the shadow of his wings. Imagine a great bird with its wings spread out wide. Those wings would protect the little birds beneath from predators, from weather, and from any issues that might arise. Jesus does not seem to be speaking of just the little children, but instead looks at all of us with those same eyes. There's so much that he has to offer, but for the most part, we reject him. The prophet Isaiah made this prophetic statement about Jesus, the Messiah to come, in Isaiah 53, verse 3. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Even though Jesus knew every single aspect of what already had occurred, what was occurring, and what would occur, that still does not change his sadness. Jesus stated in this verse in Matthew that they would see him no more until they said, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Though we have discussed this at length before, I will explain it again briefly, just in case someone missed the previous explanation. Psalm 118:26 was the first place where we saw this statement, given prophetically. But these are exactly the same words that the people of Jerusalem cried out to Jesus as he was riding down the Palm Sunday road on a colt, the foal of a donkey. During his 3-year ministry, this was the moment when they acknowledged Jesus as king, acknowledged him as the Messiah, whom they had been waiting for. But as we know, within that week, the same mob called for his crucifixion. How did hearts change that drastically and quickly? From king to criminal in less than a week. In this verse from Matthew 23, Jesus reminds them that their house is left to them desolate. Within a single generation, in the year 70 AD, the Jewish temple in Jerusalem would be destroyed, and that temple still has not been rebuilt since that time. The Romans destroyed Jerusalem, killed many Jews, and forced many of the rest into slavery. Some escaped, and in the diaspora were spread to the 4 corners of the earth. For almost 2,000 years, there would not be a Jewish nation. None of this was a surprise to Jesus. And he also understood the huge ramifications that came from their rejection of him. From this day, when Jesus lamented over Jerusalem, until the Great Tribulation, very few Jews would acknowledge him as their Savior, their Lord, or their Messiah. Think about that for a moment. Though they were his chosen people, and he came specifically to save them, because of their rejection, all of those generations of Jewish people were destined for hell. That gives us a little better idea of what Jesus was feeling. But again, Jesus came knowing that this was exactly what would happen. He did not act any differently or love them any less, knowing the rejection that would occur. Though their eyes may be blinded now, they will not always be blinded. Israel remains the natural branch, and though we as Gentiles have been grafted in, we are not to boast against them. For a refresher, read Romans 11. Sin always comes back to pride. The Pharisees ventured into spiritual pride, and it kept them from seeing Jesus. Pride affects all of us in the same way, and instead of boasting in self, we are to boast only in Jesus Christ. The Pharisees led many astray, and there are Christian pastors doing the same today. Follow Jesus, not man. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Have a blessed day.